just gotten so many stealth launches over the years that are really surprising, mostly with big titles like when Minecraft randomly showed up on the new Nintendo 3DS in 2017. But fans of visual novel The House in Fata Morgana and Novactical, now known as Novac, got a really nice surprise. A spin-off game of The House in Fata Morgana, well, sort of, we'll get into more of that later, just randomly showed up on the eShop for $7.99. Fata Morgana is one of my favorite games of all time. I've got it on the Vita, PC, and bought it not once or twice, but 3 times on the Switch. The digital version, the normal retail version from Limited Run Games, and that big collector's edition. So I couldn't help but dive right in. Here is my review of 7th Lair for the Nintendo Switch. Now to get it out of the way, you don't have to play Fata Morgana to understand this game. Why? Because it's completely separated. These characters are from The House in Fata Morgana. Some of the backdrops and the scenes are also from that game, but it's not related to it in any way, shape, or form. These characters have mild similarities with their Fata Morgana counterparts like Nelly and Mel being siblings, but that's it. Think of it like Novak making a new VN, but reusing a lot of their old sprites. Now the story here is about Mitchell, an indie game developer trying to make ends meet, whom becomes trapped inside a game world that may or may not be something that he created himself. He travels through the game world with people who regularly visited his own development forum on the website as they all try to find a way to escape. Now, as you might expect, this is a much more modern setting here than the older gothic one of Fata Morgana. People are talking about smartphones, websites to download digital games, slang words like boomer, and the like. But the story here was definitely Novak, as it is really good. But not because of the game world. The plot here goes back and forth between Mitchell trying to escape the world of 7th Lair and flashbacks of him struggling with criticisms from his games and meeting a beautiful girl named Giselle. But it does do a lot to set itself up. I'll admit that the first quote-unquote arc of the game world is decent, but not great. I was much more interested in the growing relationship between Mitchell and Giselle from the flashbacks than the game world adventure. But once the character deep dives happen a couple hours in, it gets crazy and really good. Also, don't be fooled by the tongue-in-cheek flair of the game's description. I thought I was just going to enjoy a little comedy story without crying, and my heart was absolutely crushed towards the end. It might not be as deep and crazy as what happened in Fata Morgana, but it dives into really dark stuff. When it comes to gameplay, 7th Lair is a very basic visual novel. As you trek through it, you'll navigate story scenes over the course of the 5 or so hour campaign. Now first, let's give a little more context on what this game is. Think of it like an asset flip visual novel, but made by the developers as the game the assets came from. Novak took a bunch of their characters, kept most of their names, and just made new characters out of them with a few returning traits. Not all assets are reused. Many background environments do appear to be new, though a few do still show up just as they were in the Switch version of Fata Morgana. When you get to the main menu, you have normal options like starting a new game, inspecting memories to load save data, and Royaume Heaven, that roughly translates from French to Kingdom of Heaven. It's the website mentioned in the game's plot that Mitchell used to house a forum in all of his game downloads. The cool thing here is that it's a real website. Selecting this or seeing Nelly show it in the story lets you scan a QR code on your phone to open a real website showing advertisements for the games like Fairy House, and even shows the forum with posts from the screen names used for the in-game characters. It's an interesting thing to check out as you play the game as well, as many of the forum messages can help foreshadow events that happen later on in the story. Now, playing the game is very straightforward. You go from scene to scene and just enjoy the story unfolding, from the hilarious jokes about the game world text appearing above the characters, all the way to the heart-crushing finale. You've got features like skipping, auto, and really everything else the House in Fata Morgana had, as it's clearly using the same engine as the Switch version of that title. And it's actually a little comical with how exact that was. 7th Lair doesn't have any split paths or dialogue choices, just the story and that's it. Yet the settings feature has that option for stopping the skip function at a dialogue choice, something this game doesn't have. Now, the actual progression is nice with it just being a straight story, though I really do wish there were dialogue choices so I could change that ending, but it's nice for you to just sit back and relax as you read through the dialogue. Though I do have one nitpick about how this is presented. When you go through scenes of the game world, you get typical VN scenes where the character sprites are on screen and you see dialogue and names on a box towards the bottom. But during the real world and flashbacks, you get occasional sprites, but text just takes over this box that uses the entire screen, covering up the background images and sprites themselves. I went back through the first arc of Fata Morgana as I don't remember the original game doing this. Not only does this box cover up the beautiful art when you see Giselle in front of cities and sunsets, but it can be confusing when you have multiple people talking in the box with no text to clarify which line is for what character. But outside of that nitpick, I don't have any real complaints about the game. It's not as long as Fata Morgana. It's only $8 and will last you about 5 to 6 hours, plus another 30 minutes or so for an unlockable side story once you beat the game. So not a massive time sink, but pretty good for the price. Next up is presentation, which looks good as it should, considering most of the assets were originally from Fata Morgana. The reused sprites look good, though the new hospital background does kind of clash with the rest of the game. It looks like an actual real-world live-action picture of a hospital versus the more artistic backgrounds of the game world and other places. No issues with performance, never ran into any lag, loading problems, or crashing, so let's go right into battery life. 7th Lair gives the original model 4 to 5 hours, the Lite gets 4.5 to 6, the V2 8 to 9, and the OLED 8 to 10. In conclusion, 7th Lair is a very odd VN containing characters from Fata Morgana, but they're completely different people in a modern game development setting instead of the creepy gothic mansion. Now on the downside, the way text covers up the whole screen during flashbacks makes things a bit confusing and weird, and the story doesn't get really engaging until the 2-hour point when all the crazy stuff happens. But if you can get to that point, it's gonna take you on a ride from witnessing a funny little parody to a horrific, heart-crushing story that'll bring Novak fans right back to that everyone is crying point of the previous game, just without that track in the background. Reviews to go rates 7th Lair for the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.